July 19th, 1944, near Caen, Normandy. Before sunrise, a heavy fog rolls over the hedgerows, muffling the distant thunder of artillery. In the gray half-light, Hauptmann Friedrich Keller of the Luftwaffe stands beside the charred remains of what had been his command vehicle. The smell of burned rubber mixes with wet soil. His uniform, once crisp, is torn and streaked with mud. He presses a trembling hand to his ear, still ringing from the explosion that overturned the convoy moments earlier. Somewhere in the mist, American voices shout orders. Keller draws a slow breath and steadies himself. Moments earlier, he had believed he might still slip away through the hedgerow maze. But that hope vanished when a burst of Thompson fire cracked overhead, chewing into the branches like snapping bones. Now the shapes are closing in, silhouettes moving with practiced caution, bayonets glinting in the haze. A command rings out, Hände hoch. Friedrich Keller lifts his hands. Boots splash through puddles as a squad from the 29th Infantry Division surrounds him. One soldier, a sergeant built like a quarry wall, swings Keller around and snaps shackles over his wrists. Another rifles through Keller's map case, pulling out flight charts and radar intercept reports, papers Keller had guarded with almost religious zeal. The sergeant studies him for a moment, chewing on the corner of a cigarette. You Luftwaffe? Keller nods once, jaw clenched. The sergeant exhales smoke. Good. Intel's gonna love you. Keller is marched away, stumbling over roots and rubble. Behind him, the wreckage of the convoy fades into the fog. Ahead lies a war he has only glimpsed from the cockpit, a world of prisons, interrogation rooms, and questions he never imagined he'd have to answer. Hours later, Keller sits in the back of a GMC truck bouncing along a muddy road leading west. He can't see through the canvas, but he hears everything. The rhythmic clatter of the engine, the rumble of distant tanks, the casual English chatter of the guards. He listens, an officer's instinct, but every word feels like another nail sealing his fate. By late afternoon, the truck slows, turning through a checkpoint into what appears to be an encampment of tents, antennas, and communications trucks. Keller's pulse quickens. This is no ordinary POW cage. He is escorted across the compound toward a nondescript tent with blackout flaps. Inside, the air is cool, smelling faintly of coffee and machine oil. A single bulb dangles overhead. Two officers sit at a table, one British, one American, both in crisp uniforms, both watching him with the detached curiosity of surgeons preparing to dissect a specimen. Keller takes a seat as ordered. The British officer, a thin man with wire-rimmed spectacles, studies him like a puzzle piece. Hauptmann Keller, he begins in precise German, your unit has been most informative. Keller's stomach tightens. He had assumed his men were dead. The American leans forward and sets a small device on the table. It's metallic, compact, with a parabolic dish no larger than a hand. Keller recognizes the concept, but not the technology. Tell us, the American says quietly, what does the Luftwaffe know about our radar systems? Keller hesitates. He knows his duty. He also knows these interrogators are not improvising. They already have answers, or they wouldn't be asking. He keeps his voice level. Our intelligence is incomplete. The British officer smiles faintly. Then allow us to complete it for you. He opens a folder, slides across a photograph, a towering steel structure on the English coast, bristling with antennas pointed toward the channel. Chain Home, he says. I imagine you've heard the name. Keller has, every Luftwaffe officer has, but he has never seen such clarity, such detail. He tries to keep his expression still. The American officer continues, voice calm, but edged with something like triumph. By the way, Hauptmann, this was taken in 1939. A chill crawls up Keller's spine. If the Allies had this much capability before the war even began, what do they have now? And then the British officer delivers the first blow one that lands harder than any rifle butt. You Germans never bombed the right stations, not once, not even close. Keller feels his breath catch. The British officer leans back, folding his hands. We weren't just watching your bombers, Hauptmann. We were measuring them, pinpointing them. The network was never blind, not for a single night. Keller's pulse thunders. For the first time since his capture, he feels something far heavier than fear. He feels the ground shifting beneath the entire war, and he realizes he may be about to learn just how far behind Germany really is. Keller sits frozen as the bulb above him flickers, casting long shadows across the tent canvas. Outside, he hears the faint hum of generators and the distant clatter of a field kitchen. But inside the briefing tent, time feels suspended, stretched between what he thought he knew and what these officers are about to reveal. The British officer taps the photograph of the chain home tower with a neatly trimmed fingernail. You Germans assumed these were primitive, he says, long range only, crude, easy to jam. He lifts another photo from the folder and places it beside the first. A night shot now, taken from a reconnaissance aircraft, showing synchronized beams sweeping across the channel in narrow arcs. They weren't crude, he continues, they were layered, they were networked, they were built to survive. Keller clenches his jaw. The officer's voice softens, but the words strike harder. And they did survive, even when your high command thought they had destroyed them, even when Goering promised the Führer otherwise. Keller's eyes flicker. He remembers the briefings, the bomb damage reports, the triumphant claims that the radar grid had been shattered. He remembers believing every word. But now, here, staring at the evidence spread before him like a surgeon's display tray, he feels the first twist of betrayal. The American officer stands and crosses to a wooden crate. He flips the lid and pulls out a compact device wrapped in cloth. When he unwraps it, Keller sees a small chassis with vacuum tubes, waveguides, and a precisely machined cavity. It glimmers like something from another age. This, the American says, is where the war really changed. He sets the device down with reverence. A magnetron, our microwave radar heart, 10 kilowatts, 10 centimeters, airborne. Keller stares, his mouth goes dry. The American continues, while your night fighters scrambled in the dark, ours used this to hunt U-boats, track aircraft, and guide bombers through storms. Entire battles turned because of it. The British officer adds quietly, your Freyas and Würzburgs never caught up, not even close. Keller's pulse beats in his temples. He thinks back to the Himmelbett system, German night fighter control sectors, with operators guiding Messerschmitts into carefully calculated intercept curves. It had been elegant, complex, and, he once believed, the height of technological warfare. But the magnetron in front of him makes it look like a child's toy. The British officer observes Keller's reaction with a not unkind expression. Hauptmann Keller, he says, your Air Force gambled on high command promises. We gambled on physics. Keller forces himself to speak. If this is so advanced, why show it to me? The American officer pulls out a map of Western Europe, marked with dozens of overlapping radar coverage rings. Because, he says, you're an officer. You'll understand what it means. He taps the map with a pencil. By late 1943, every bomber you sent across the channel, every single one, was being tracked before it even crossed the French coast. A cold pressure forms in Keller's chest. We knew altitude, the American says. We knew speed. We knew headings. The British officer finishes the sentence. We knew when to strike and when to vanish. Keller's breath stutters. The American officer leans closer. Your commanders believed radar was a tool. Ours treated it as a doctrine. He gestures to the magnetron. This isn't just a device. It's the death of any Luftwaffe strategy based on surprise. Outside, a jeep rumbles past the tent, its wheels grinding gravel. Keller barely hears it. His world has narrowed to the table, the documents, and the realization settling like lead in his stomach. He whispers almost involuntarily, "How long?" The British officer answers without hesitation. "Since before you invaded Poland." Keller closes his eyes. The war he thought he understood, built on air supremacy, on precision raids, on the myth of technological equality, begins to crumble. The interrogators exchange a glance, recognizing the moment when an officer finally sees the battlefield for what it truly is. And Friedrich Keller realizes, with a clarity that seems almost cruel, that Germany may have lost this war not in 1944, but years earlier. He swallows hard, unable to look away from the magnetron. For the first time, defeat feels inevitable, and he has only begun to learn why. The tent falls silent for a long moment. Only the faint buzz of the electric bulb fills the space as Keller stares at the magnetron, small enough to hold in two hands, yet powerful enough to rewrite the entire air war. He tries to imagine a radar set compact enough to fit inside a torpedo bomber or a patrol aircraft. His mind rebels against the image. It contradicts every Luftwaffe assessment he had ever been given. The American officer finally breaks the silence. "Let me show you something else." He reaches into the crate again and lifts a black and white photograph. Keller recognizes the silhouette immediately. A U-boat, caught on the surface, a geyser of water erupting beside it from a near miss. The officer sets it in front of him, taken from a B-24 with microwave radar, in heavy cloud, at night. Keller feels a chill travel down his spine. "Impossible," he whispers before he can stop himself. The officer doesn't smile. "Not for us. Not with this," he says, tapping the magnetron. The British officer unfolds a series of documents. Interception logs from RAF night fighter squadrons equipped with AI Make B-8 radar. Each entry lists altitudes, contacts, and kill confirmations in stark typed precision. "Your night raids on London," he says quietly. "We tracked many of your bombers through the overcast. Our mosquitoes intercepted them long before your crews realized they'd been detected." Keller swallows. His vision tightens at the edges. He thinks of the briefings he delivered to his own pilots, stern lectures about maintaining radio silence, flying below radar beams, exploiting predicted gaps in British coverage. He remembers telling them they would be ghosts in the night. Now he learns they had been silhouettes under a spotlight. The American officer steps toward a wall chart showing radar coverage radiating from countless Allied outposts: Scotland, Wales, Malta, Gibraltar, Iceland, even advanced stations in liberated France. By 1944, he says, radar isn't just on the coast. It's on ships, on aircraft, on mobile ground sets rolling behind Patton's tanks. He circles a zone over Normandy. This entire battle space, every valley, every field, is scanned around the clock. If a Luftwaffe aircraft lifts off from any airfield in France, we pointer it. Keller tries to speak, but his voice cracks. This can't be everywhere. No system has such coverage. The British officer raises an eyebrow. Yours didn't. The American completes the thought. Ours did. Keller looks down at his shackled hands as if seeing them for the first time. He feels suddenly weightless, as though the canvas floor beneath him is giving way. The British officer pulls one final sheet from the folder, an intelligence assessment stamped top secret, across the margin. He slides it across the table. It is a diagram of the German Kammhuber line, the Luftwaffe's vaunted night defense belt, with red marks slashed across its grid. Your entire system, the British officer says, depended on predictability, fixed beams, fixed sectors, fixed response times. He points to the magnetron, then to the photograph of the crippled U-boat, then to the coverage map. Microwave radar shattered all of that. It's smaller, it's portable, it's accurate. It can see through weather. It can track targets you don't even know are there. Keller feels his throat constrict. All at once, the truth settles on him, not as a dramatic revelation, but as something steady, undeniable, and crushingly simple. Germany has been fighting the wrong war. They had built faster fighters, better optics, more powerful guns. They had obsessed over speed, altitude, armor. They had poured resources into experimental aircraft, V-weapons, desperate leaps of imagination. But none of it mattered, because the Allies had mastered the one thing Germany had overlooked: the electromagnetic battlefield. The British officer speaks softly now, almost gently. It's not your pilot's fault, Hauptmann, nor your engineers. This war was decided by the men who understood waves, not wings. Keller closes his eyes. For the first time since the tent flap opened, he is no longer thinking of himself or his lost convoy. He is thinking of home, of Berlin, of the young pilots he trained, boys, many of them, sent into the night believing they had a chance. They had never stood a chance. The American officer's voice cuts through the heavy quiet. This is why we're showing you all this. We want you to understand the truth. Keller lifts his gaze, hollowed by realization. The truth, he murmurs, that Germany was defeated long before we knew it. The American nods once. Yes, Hauptmann. And the sooner your high command accepts that, the sooner this war ends. Keller's breathing slows. The tent feels unbearably small. He had arrived here a prisoner. He now sits as a witness to a secret his nation never wanted to admit. And though he does not say it aloud, he understands something with terrifying clarity. The Luftwaffe is already dead. It just hasn't fallen from the sky yet. The interrogators say nothing more. They no longer need to. The truth has carved itself deeply enough into Keller's expression that further explanation would only be cruelty. The American officer gathers his documents into a neat stack, while the British officer extinguishes the dangling bulb with a pull of its cord. The tent is plunged into dim ambient light filtering through the canvas seams. A guard enters. Sir, we're ready for the transfer. The British officer nods and gestures to Keller. You'll be moved to a more permanent facility. They'll treat you fairly. Keller rises slowly. His legs feel unsteady, as though the ground beneath him has changed density. The guard takes him by the arm, not roughly, simply as routine, and guides him outside. Evening has fallen over the compound. The horizon glows faintly orange where artillery flashes dance along the front. The air smells of damp earth and diesel exhaust. But another scent hangs there too, an odor Keller cannot immediately identify. The faint electric tang of radio equipment humming in synchronized rhythm. Dozens of antenna masts twist upward like iron trees. Radar vans, their parabolic dishes gleaming under lampposts, pivot with mechanical precision. Operators move briskly between them, headsets on, hands flicking switches and tuning dials. Keller pauses. This is an entire village built around radar. A heartbeat later, he understands the scent. Ozone. The guard nudges him forward, but Keller stops again, this time because he recognizes a sound. That low, steady pulse of rotating radar dishes, the click-clack of servo motors, the distant buzz of power generators. He has heard these sounds before, faintly, from Allied reconnaissance photos or Luftwaffe intelligence briefings. But he has never stood in the middle of it, never felt the raw, physical presence of an electromagnetic battlefield surrounding him on all sides. To his left, an American technician calls out, "Sweep complete, chain overlap confirmed." Another voice responds from inside a van. "Set to scan for low-altitude tracks. We've got reports of 100 Untines near Falaise." A British officer carrying a clipboard walks briskly between the two teams. "Scramble the mosquitoes if they get within 40 miles. Let's keep the night clean." Keller freezes. This is routine, fluent, effortless. A seamless web of detection, coordination, and response, something the Luftwaffe had once dreamed of creating but never achieved beyond isolated sectors. Here, it sprawls across the countryside like a living organism. The guard tugs his arm. "Come on, Hauptmann," he mutters, but Keller barely hears him. His eye catches something else. A convoy of trucks pulling canvas-covered crates marked U.S. Signal Corps, radar equipment. Soldiers unload them with practiced efficiency, stacking them beside other crates stamped with names Keller has never seen in German intelligence: SCR 584, ASV, MKX, H2X. These are not isolated prototypes. These are not experimental curiosities. These are mass-produced weapons, rolling off assembly lines the way Germany produces rifles. The realization hits him harder than any interrogation. Germany is not fighting one miracle technology. It is fighting hundreds, thousands, a tidal wave of scientific infrastructure too vast to comprehend. As Keller is escorted toward a waiting jeep, he hears the distant roar of engines overhead. He looks up through the dusky sky and sees two shapes streaking across the fading light, sleek, purposeful, their navigation lamps blinking rhythmically. Mosquito night fighters, almost silent, almost ghostly. One of the guards glances up. "Those boys are heading to check out a radar contact near Cherbourg," he says casually. "With the new microwave sets, they'll find whatever it is." The jeep door opens. Keller hesitates before climbing in. He looks back one last time at the radar village, the moving dishes, the humming trucks, the swirling activity of the Allied Signal Corps. It reminds him of an anthill, alive with purpose, where every individual knows their task. And he understands with sudden, almost painful clarity, this is why we lost France. This is why we lost the skies. This is why we will lose everything. Because while Germany gambled on wonder weapons and sweeping offensives, the Allies built a machine, a quiet, invisible, unstoppable machine that mapped every movement of the battlefield in waves and pulses. The guard finally presses a hand to his back. Keller steps into the jeep. As the engine revs and the vehicle pulls away, Keller looks down at his bound hands resting in his lap. They tremble, not from fear, but from the enormity of what he now carries in his mind, a knowledge so vast and so damning that even victory in 100 dogfights could never balance the scales. The jeep turns down a gravel road, leaving the radar village behind, and in the quiet, as night settles over Normandy, Friedrich Keller realizes something no officer of the Reich was ever meant to know. The war was never about steel or firepower or bravery. It was about frequencies, and Germany had never even been listening. The jeep rattles down the narrow road, its headlights cutting thin tunnels through the dark. The hum of radar equipment fades behind them, replaced by the low chorus of crickets and the distant rumble of artillery echoing across the Normandy countryside. Keller sits stiffly in the back, his wrists resting on his knees, the cold bite of the shackles grounding him in a reality that feels increasingly unreal. The guard beside him adjusts his helmet strap and glances over. "You all right, Hauptmann?" The question is casual, but it lands with unexpected force. Keller searches for an answer, any answer, but the words snag in his throat. What could he possibly say? That in one afternoon the entire foundation of his military career had been stripped bare? That he had seen the skeleton of Germany's defeat laid out with clinical precision? He manages only a quiet, "I am thinking." The guard nods, accepting the answer, and turns back toward the road. The jeep navigates past a cluster of hedgerows, then rolls toward a makeshift checkpoint lit by 2 flood lamps. British military police wave them through. Beyond the gate lies an improvised collection of barracks and communications huts, a temporary holding center for enemy officers. A few POWs stand near a fence, smoking, talking in low tones, their voices carrying through the night. The jeep stops. The driver kills the engine. The sudden silence is startling. Keller steps down when instructed, his boots crunching on the gravel. The guard escorts him toward a small wooden building with barred windows. Yet Keller's gaze drifts elsewhere, to the far corner of the compound, where a group of British technicians huddle over a map pinned to a folding table. Curiosity, old habits of an intelligence officer, draws his attention. The technicians are marking radar coverage zones around the Cotentin Peninsula. Each sweep overlaps in precise geometric patterns. Keller's trained eye recognizes the unmistakable sign of a fully integrated radar net. Redundant, flexible, resilient. A net that cannot be slipped through. One of the technicians marks a cluster of dots representing Luftwaffe airfields still operating in northern France. Tracks show takeoffs here at dusk yesterday, the man says. We caught every one. Another replies, makes you wonder why they even try. The words cut deeper than any interrogation. Keller inhales slowly, the night air cool against his face. He thinks of the pilots under his command, men who believed that courage, precision, and tactical instinct could turn the tide. He thinks of the endless hours spent briefing them on evasion tactics, on exploiting presumed weaknesses in Allied detection. All lies, not intentional ones perhaps, but lies all the same, born from ignorance, sustained by arrogance, and paid for in lives. The guard guides him toward the building. Inside, the room is stark, wooden bunks, dim lantern light, a single desk where a clerk records new arrivals. Keller steps forward as his name is logged, his unit listed, his effects cataloged. But his mind remains elsewhere. A memory surfaces. Berlin, 1940. Keller sitting in a briefing room with other junior officers, listening to a senior Luftwaffe general dismiss the radar threat. Radio detection is a novelty, the general had said confidently. What matters is decisive force, speed, shock, the will to dominate the skies. The officers had nodded. Keller had nodded. Because at that time, after Poland, after France, victory seemed inevitable. Now, standing in a foreign compound surrounded by the tools of Allied dominance, Keller feels the crushing weight of that long-ago arrogance. The clerk finishes his notes and nods to the guard. Right, place him in Block C. The guard gestures for Keller to follow. They walk down a dim corridor to a small cell furnished only with a cot and a metal stool. The guard removes Keller's shackles, moving with a certain reluctant respect, then steps back. Someone will speak with you in the morning, he says. Rest while you can. The door closes behind him with a muted clang. Keller sits on the cot. The spring creaks under his weight. He presses his palms together, fingers trembling slightly. He had expected that capture would bring fear. He had expected anger, humiliation, uncertainty, but he had not expected this. A deep, hollow grief, not for himself, but for the thousands of airmen still flying under hopeless assumptions, for a nation still convinced it could win a war already decided, for a generation sacrificed to the illusion of technological parity. Keller leans forward, his elbows on his knees, staring at the floorboards. The British officer's words return to him with relentless clarity. This war was decided by the men who understood waves, not wings. He whispers the sentence to himself, tasting its bitter truth. Outside, a radar dish rotates, its motor whirring, a quiet reminder of the invisible lattice stretching across continents, shaping a war most people would never see. In that sound, Keller hears the future, a future where technology will decide wars long before soldiers march or aircraft scramble, a future Germany had never prepared for. And with that realization heavy in his chest, Friedrich Keller understands that the greatest defeat of the Luftwaffe was not in the skies, but in the equations their leaders never bothered to learn. Keller lies awake long after the lights in the corridor have been extinguished. The thin mattress beneath him offers little comfort, but it is not discomfort that keeps him staring at the ceiling. It is the steady thrum of distant machinery, the heartbeat of Allied radar, that echoes faintly through the night. Every rhythmic sweep, every electric pulse feels like a reminder of what he has learned, and what Germany never did. He closes his eyes, but the images from the briefing refuse to fade. The chain home towers rising like silent sentinels along the English coast. The compact magnetron shining under the lamp. the sweeping radar arcs layered with surgical precision across Europe. He sees again the photograph of the U-boat under airborne pursuit. He sees the meticulously plotted Kemhuber line dissected and defeated by an enemy who understood the battlefield in dimensions the Luftwaffe had never considered. And he sees the faces of his pilots, smiling, confident, oblivious to the invisible forces that sealed their fate long before they strapped into their cockpits. The cell is quiet. Outside, a breeze rustles the canvas roofs of nearby barracks. Somewhere, a generator coughs to life. The night feels vast and indifferent. At last, Keller sits upright. His thoughts drift to the man he once wanted to be. A career officer, a leader, someone who could guide his men through the chaos of war with clarity and purpose. But clarity had come too late, and purpose had been shackled to illusions. He whispers to himself, the German words barely audible. Wir waren blind. We were blind. The sound of footsteps approaches down the corridor, measured, unhurried. A key turns. The door opens, spilling a rectangle of pale light across the floor. A British intelligence captain steps inside. Hauptmann Keller, he says softly. A word, if you're able. Keller rises automatically. The captain leads him to a small office where a kettle steams atop a potbelly stove. 2 chairs sit across from each other. The room feels strangely calm, far removed from interrogation tents and humming radar installations. The captain motions for Keller to sit. We're not here to question you further tonight, he says. He pours a mug of tea and sets it gently in front of Keller. I thought perhaps you might want to speak. Keller's fingers wrap around the warm ceramic. For a long moment, he says nothing. Then quietly he asks, Tell me, when did you know? When did you realize radar would win the air war? The captain considers this. His answer is simple. 1940, he says. When we learned our towers still worked, even when your aircraft crews claimed they had destroyed them. When every raid confirmed what Dr. Watson Watt had told us years earlier. Keller nods, slowly. He has heard the name. He understands now that he should have known it sooner. The captain leans forward, folding his hands. Germany fought bravely. No one denies that. But bravery alone doesn't bend physics. And by 1944, physics was firmly on our side. Keller closes his eyes. The truth is not a knife. It is a weight, steady, crushing, inevitable. The captain stands. You'll be moved again soon. Treated well. Your war is over, Hauptmann. Keller opens his eyes. No, he murmurs. Our war was over years ago. We just refused to see it. The captain pauses, then nods, a gesture of understanding rather than victory. Keller returns to his cell without resistance. He sits on the cot, listening once more to the faint hum of rotating dishes on the night air. The sound is no longer foreign. It has become something like a requiem, the quiet song of a war, decided in wavelengths and frequencies, in laboratories and test ranges, in ideas Germany never fully grasped. He lies down again, staring at the faint pattern of knots in the wooden boards above. For the first time since the war began, he allows himself to feel something he has not dared to feel. Acceptance. Not of defeat on the battlefield, but of the deeper truth the interrogators had revealed. A truth measured not in dogfights or frontline victories, but in oscillations and pulses, in invisible signals sweeping through the night. Germany lost the moment it underestimated the power of science. It lost the moment it dismissed the radar towers along the English coast as mere curiosities. It lost the moment it believed courage alone could blind an enemy who had long ago learned how to see in the dark. Friedrich Keller exhales, long and slow, as the final pieces of understanding settle into place. The Allies had not outflown Germany. They had outthought it. And with that realization, quiet, profound, absolute, Hauptmann Friedrich Keller closes his eyes. The hum of radar echoes across the compound. The future hums with it.